Hello and welcome to the arcade. You know, I've been a big fan of the Monster Hunter series since about 2006, and I've talked about that before. But I wanted to put that into a little bit of perspective before we talk about Monster Hunter Wilds.
In 2006, I was 14 years old, so my parents didn't really allow me to play M-rated games, for the most part. I was allowed to play Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance for some reason, but back then I really wanted an open-world adventure to dive into. The idea of an open-world video game was not quite as popular as it is now, except for maybe the Grand Theft Auto series. So I asked my mom if she would buy me GTA San Andreas, as I had borrowed it from a friend and absolutely loved it. Of course, my mom freaked out and told me I was not allowed to play GTA, which the title of the game was a crime, in her words, and that I would no longer be able to play M-rated games at all. After that little mishap, I decided to browse eBay, of all places, looking for an open-world game for my PS2, which was the only console I had at the time. I couldn't think to check game trailers, IGN, no, just eBay. What was I thinking? So anyway, I typed in the eBay search bar, open world PS2 games, and lo and behold, the first game that appeared was GTA, of course. But after scrolling for a bit, I found something interesting. Monster Hunter. Could it be an open world action game based around squatting up and taking down large beasts like dragons? After seeing that cover, I looked up the trailer on GameTrailers.com and I was instantly hooked. I knew I needed this game. So I convinced my dad to order it, and 2 weeks later I got my first taste of what would become my favorite gaming franchise of all time. Sure, it wasn't an open world game like eBay promised it would be, but it was fun enough that I didn't really care. And of course, I was young, and so was the Monster Hunter series, so I really struggled to get going in that first game. But something about it just pulled me in and kept me coming back. It felt so immersive, and to be honest, it still does. That first generation of Monster Hunter has a charm unlike anything else since. It's not the best game in the series, and I much prefer the later games, but that first game is still one of my favorite gaming experiences I've ever had. After slogging through the single player, I hopped online and got carried by this absolute legend who helped me until I got my first good armor set. And he even continued to help me through the next weeks until I finally got to Lao Shan Lung. What a guy. Fast forward a year and I had a PSP and I picked up a copy of Monster Hunter Freedom 2 after seeing some trailers and promotional material in Game Informer. I played it and loved it, but I did eventually pick up Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, which was objectively a much better experience. And probably the best game ever released for the PSP, right up there with Killzone Liberation, Daxter, Final Fantasy Dissidia, and Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. Fast forward another couple years and I pre-ordered a game with my own money for the first time, Monster Hunter 3 for the Wii. Me and my best friend played the absolute mess out of that game, even reaching the end game fighting the toughest versions of Jen Moran, Cedius, and Alatreon. Or Alatreon. I put probably around 300 hours into Monster Hunter 3 on the Wii and another 250 hours into Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate on the 3DS. And now I'm starting to notice a recurring theme, with each subsequent Monster Hunter game becoming my favorite on the console after that PS2 era. My favorite PSP game, Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. Favorite Wii game, Monster Hunter 3. Favorite 3DS game, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. Favorite PS4 game, Monster Hunter World. I guess you'd be safe to assume that I love these games and have been playing them for many, many years. I don't go super hardcore on each entry. I never did any multiplayer on the PSP games, never did any on Generations Ultimate either. I did some multiplayer on Monster Hunter Rise, but ultimately didn't stick with that game for more than like 70 hours total. Which I know that is a lot for any normal game, but the real endgame of Monster Hunter takes about 60 hours just to get into a lot of the times. For the most part, the games all follow a very similar formula. You play through the story mode, which consists of main quests that follow a plot thread, usually about all the monsters in the area going crazy because another larger monster, is making them go crazy. So you investigate to find out what's going on, and it progresses up to a third or fourth level of bigger and bigger monster making the smaller monsters crazy, and then it's like that until you get to the end. The actual gameplay those quests consist of is broken down into categories. You might be gathering items, completing investigations, repelling a large monster, or capturing or slaying a large monster. The later games have moved away from gathering being its own quest type, and instead having gathering being something that you do naturally during the course of any quest or while exploring freely through any area. Those of us who have played the older games don't really miss the pain of the wyvern egg quests, but sometimes I do miss the more laid-back quests where you're just looking for stuff, or even quests where you think you're just looking for stuff, but then a new monster you've never seen before attacks you out of nowhere. That was actually a really cool way that some of the older games would reveal a new monster. The village chief would send you out to look for mushrooms or whatever, and you'd go out completely unassuming, only to get ambushed by a giant wyvern you'd never imagined someone could fight on their own. But sure enough, you'd be expected to take down that monster at some point in the later village quests, or even at the very end. After the village quests are done, you then move into the gathering hub quests, which are typically done through multiplayer. These tend to ramp up the difficulty quite a bit, introducing bigger and badder monsters, tougher clear conditions like hunting 2 monsters at a time, and stuff like that. Once all the hub quests are done, you do event quests, which are released on a regular content schedule, and get new quests through title updates, which are bigger updates that add a lot to the game, but aren't quite big enough to be considered DLC. Those event quests and title updates are the true endgame of a Monster Hunter title. There is also usually one big paid DLC released for each of the games that adds even more story quests, hub quests, and new event quests and title updates. These DLCs tend to also completely invalidate all of your old gear, including weapons and armor that you've grinded for so long. So the DLCs can feel like a brand new game, or at least a big in-game sequel to the base game. You gotta do that grind all over again, but admittedly, it's usually quicker to get back to the endgame level this time around. Now, here's a list of all the games from this series that I've played, that I've beaten, and reached true endgame. I have played but not beaten Generations Ultimate and Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. I have played and beaten but not reached true endgame in Monster Hunter 1, Freedom 2, Freedom Unite, 4 Ultimate, and Iceborne. And I have played and reached the true endgame of Monster Hunter 3, 3 Ultimate, World, Rise, and Wilds. Now, with all that setup out of the way, I can now tell you, as a longtime fan of the series, someone who has played the games casually and hardcore, what I really think of Monster Hunter Wilds. Considering my long history with this series, how I've felt about each new generation and how the series has evolved, my preferences between the console entries versus handheld entries, I can confidently say that Monster Hunter Wilds is in fact the new Monster Hunter game. And that's all it is, for better or worse. Honestly, it fits the pattern that Capcom has been following and how these games have been evolving. Sure, it does have a ton of new systems that allow newer players to the series to get their foot in the door a lot more quickly, but it doesn't feel like any major change or radical departure from the series or what makes these games fun. It may not be as challenging as World or Iceborne, but it's certainly more challenging than Rise and Sunbreak. But at the same time, it does have some things that have not sat quite right with longtime fans of the series, plus the PC performance and game optimization issues on top of all that. But all that being said, it really is just the next Monster Hunter game, which is perfectly fine with me. At the time of writing this, I'm around HR 105 and have a little over 70 hours in the game according to Steam. It's probably going to be my pick for Game of the Year for 2025. And sure, I do think some things are a little too streamlined, maybe too optimized or even too automated, but the core of what makes these games so fun is still here, and I have enjoyed every minute that I have spent with this game so far. We have just recently received our first title update for the game, and no plans for a DLC have been announced yet, so I think we have plenty of time to just sit back, relax, and enjoy this game for what it is. And what is it? Well, let me tell you. Monster Hunter Wilds is the latest entry in the Monster Hunter franchise. It is a mainline console entry as opposed to a spin-off like Monster Hunter Stories, or handheld like Monster Hunter Rise. It can be considered the direct follow-up to Monster Hunter World/Iceborne. The gameplay loop primarily feels just like any other Monster Hunter game, with some small differences here and there, mainly things that are in favor of streamlining the gameplay to facilitate less time between hunts. We'll talk more specifics later. The game can be played solo or with up to 4 hunters per quest. So far, I have not touched the multiplayer at all. I have been doing it all solo up to this point, and probably won't jump into multiplayer until some of my friends get the game. I played with all randoms in Monster Hunter Rise, and it was fun, but success during hunts was hit or miss. One of the big changes in this game is how much of a main focus the story is. In this game, the hunter, your character, actually speaks. And there's a ton of dialogue, cutscenes, and story missions. The storyline is serviceable, but not necessary in my opinion. It doesn't really do anything to enhance the gameplay, but it also doesn't take away from it. It doesn't do an over-the-top cinematic story like maybe the Uncharted games, but it also doesn't do a hidden background kind of story like Elden Ring. It definitely tries to be more like a blockbuster kind of story like Uncharted maybe, but for me it doesn't land quite right. Something about it just feels off. It's hard for me to explain. I prefer in video games when they just let the story unfold around you rather than kind of shove it down your throat. Like in the older Monster Hunter games, the same things were kind of happening, monsters going crazy because of a bigger monster, but they did a better job of delivering it more naturally through dialogue or in text that you had to read and in quests that appeared for you to take. The cutscenes in older games were almost exclusively for showing off new monsters. But now it's like all of the cutscenes are trying to make the game a little too cinematic instead of more natural. There's a cutscene for everything. And the natural nature of the monsters and environments is something that Monster Hunter really thrives on, so it feels a little jarring to have all these cutscenes and dialogue. Although, I will say, by the end of the story, I did start to come around on most of the characters. They all had their reasons for being there, and they had decent enough backstories to fuel their motivations. But some of the acting and writing just felt a little bit undercooked. It doesn't even really matter though, because the environments, the weapons, the combat, the gameplay as a whole feels bigger and better than ever. I'm now going to talk about the story and its missions, so if you haven't experienced the story of this game for yourself, I'll try to avoid spoilers so you can experience it fresh. Alright, now this is how forgettable the story was. At the time of writing this, it's only been a couple of months since the game came out. I've completed all 6 chapters of the story missions and been digging into the high rank for a while now, and I cannot remember how the game even starts. Oh wait, okay, now I remember. So there's a ship traveling through the desert. It's full of a crew that's investigating the forbidden lands, the wilds if you will. So they come across someone in distress, and the hunter steps in to help. This sequence acts as a micro tutorial and a story set piece to introduce you to the main cast. You're then quickly thrown into your first big fight against the Chotacabra. After that, you head back to camp and get set up to take on your first couple of quests in the main storyline. I don't want to spoil the monster reveals or even the location reveals, but I will say that you do get out of the desert area and experience a lot more biodiversity pretty quick. There are 3 chapters with about 3 to 5 missions each that you have to complete in order to beat the main storyline and roll credits. However, this is what you will miss if you stop at the credit roll. There are still major story developments, so after the credits, there's still a lot of the main story. There are still cutscenes, dialogue, missions, and side quests. New areas to explore, more ranks to grind, new abilities to unlock. Really, the credit roll is just an excuse for the casual players to hop out and still feel like they got their money's worth out of the game. The more dedicated new players and the longtime fans of the series will probably keep playing to experience what comes next, which includes new monsters and new hunts. All of the really tough fights and strongest versions of monsters won't appear until you're deeper into high rank. It's also where you'll get the best armor and best weapons available in the game, and this will be necessary to beat all of the tougher monsters the game has to offer. Then there's the event quests and tempered monsters as well. If you want unique challenges and also the hardest monsters of the entire game, you will have to play well past the credits. And once you reach a certain high rank, you'll unlock many other things like the ability to meld your own decorations of a specific tier. So it's really worth it if you're a committed player to make it all the way to rank 100 in high rank. Okay, now I gotta be honest with you guys. I actually started writing this review when I was high rank 65 or so, and now by the time I'm finishing this, I'm high rank 105. I can't even recall all of the different event quests that have come and gone since the game launched, but they are all at least fun. A lot of times there will be one that's a little lower on the level requirement and one that's a bit higher. So this helps low rank and high rank players not feel left out and have something to do with the next event quests. Sometimes it's a quest right in the middle, which is harder for new players and easier for experienced players, which just doesn't make anyone happy. But now that the Blossom Dance Festival has begun, there are a lot more event quests than normal, both of higher rank and lower rank, so there's really nothing to complain about now. Plenty of options for event quests and great rewards, whether you're just starting out or if you're a seasoned hunter by now. So, I mentioned earlier that I've been playing this game completely solo, and this is still true. I'm waiting on my friends to get the game rather than play with random teammates or join up with a group that I don't know in real life. However, that has not stopped me from completing everything, literally everything the game currently has to offer. I feel like in terms of difficulty of the endgame stuff, Wilds is definitely in the more forgiving category, especially for solo players. The only quest I failed was the Tempered Mizutsune, and I was able to get him on my very next try. I semi-regularly cart to the high-rank Zoshia, but now that I have his full armor set and weapons that I want, I don't even need to fight him anymore. It's still a really enjoyable fight though, and probably the best experience I've had in a Monster Hunter game in a long time, maybe ever. More on that fight later. Overall, I'd say Wilds is the easiest game in the series to play solo if that's your thing. Rise may be next, with some monsters being an exception to that, but yeah. I also mentioned failing the Tempered Mizutsune quest, but I'll explain a little bit more about tempered monsters. Tempered monsters have the same names as the other monsters you see throughout the game, but they will be a tempered version, which means they're older or have been through more. A tempered Rathian, for example, is a Rathian that has weathered many battles against other monsters and maybe other hunters, and as a result of that has a lot of scars, a lot more HP, and deals a lot more damage. Tempered monsters grant extra rewards and extra symbols that you're going to need for some of the best high rank gear, so it's best to learn how to hunt tempered monsters as soon as you can. Basically, learning the monster moveset is good enough, but you also have to be able to last a lot longer, so bringing a few extra healing items and crafting Mega Demon Drug and Mega Armor Skin is highly recommended. Tempered monsters also have tempered wounds, so there is still ample opportunity to proc wounds and speed up the process of taking these guys down. It is harder to produce a wound on a tempered monster, but it's necessary if you want to take them down in a reasonable amount of time. Aside from Zoshia, Tempered Arkveld, Tempered Gore Magala, and Tempered Rei Dao are probably the hardest fights in the entire game, and learning movesets and bringing lots of healing is going to be necessary to beat these guys. It's also some of the most fun you can have in this game, so you're going to want to take these fights on. Now, the Zoshia is not tempered, but it is potentially the hardest monster in the game to beat. There is a version of the Zoshia fight that you have to do in the story mode, and that's the only time you can do it. But it did finally come back in a replayable format in the first title update that Wilds received. The Zoshia armor set and weapons are particularly powerful, so I'd recommend fighting him enough to get at least the armor set and weapons if you want to. He is not really that hard to beat if you remember a few key things. Firstly, if you stay a little back from the backside of his right leg, or a little ways down from the base of his tail, basically none of his attacks can hit you. He does have times when he can move pretty fast, but generally, as long as you stay behind him, he won't do much damage at all. Second, when he is charging his Inferno Blast move, you need to either get behind him or run all the way to the edge of the map to avoid getting killed by that move. The fire doesn't reach all the way to the cave wall opposite to where he is when he first does this attack, so you'll be safe there. At least the first time it happens. After that, it's either run away or run behind him. You cannot block or dodge the Inferno, so don't bother trying that. Also, you can't hide behind objects that will block the Inferno for you. It doesn't work like that. Third thing to know, he is really hard to knock down and really hard to mount. So if you want to, bring a charm or set of decorations to boost your mounting or knockdown skills, or even bring a paralyzed weapon. These will all work great against him in terms of helping you to get more chances to put in some free damage. He takes a lot of extra damage on the head and on the front legs, and while it can be hazardous there as those are where his attacks are typically landing, it can be worth it for the extra numbers you'll be putting up hitting those locations. Last thing to know, this is a long fight because of the super high amount of health this guy has. He also has 3 phases that he goes through where his temperament, level of aggression, and moveset changes a bit, so that's something you'll need to keep track of to stay on top of the fight. Overall, the Zoshia is the most fun I've had in this game and probably the most fun monster since Gore Magala first got introduced. I want to put Nergigante somewhere in that list of the most fun monsters as well, but that's a topic for another day. Taking on monster fights over and over to get good gear has been a staple in this series since the very beginning, but in Wilds it feels like better and more rewards show up way more often than before. During the storyline, I almost never had to stop taking on the next key quest in order to grind for specific gear. I just kept plowing through for the most part and ended up with great armor. I did stop and take my time with certain monsters like Jin Dahad, but especially in the early game, there was really no reason to do this. There are so many rewards for each hunt, you'll be able to craft great armor set and weapon in almost no time. On average, for a full armor set, I usually only had to hunt a monster 3 or 4 times to get everything I needed. It was extremely rare to have to fight anything more than 5 times, and there's only one monster, Gore Magala, that I had to fight more than 10 times to get everything I needed. In addition to the weapons and armor, you'll also want a good charm and good decorations. For the charm, I really like using either earplugs so you don't get stunned by a monster's roar, or speed healing, which increases the rate at which you recover red health bar after taking damage. For decorations, I really prefer anything that raises the chance to perform a critical hit or break parts. A critical hit is when you attack and hit a monster and get a small damage boost based on a percentage. Critical hits only happen as often as your critical skill will allow, and if you stack enough decorations, you can make critical hits happen more often, drastically decreasing the amount of time it takes to beat any given monster. I also really love the Part Breaker and Flayer abilities because I like going after any extra cards I can get for each monster I hunt. Now, I want to discuss my favorite weapon for a bit, the Charge Blade. I have been using Charge Blade since it came out in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate back on the 3DS. It's one of the most dynamic weapons in the game. It has 2 modes, the Sword and Shield mode and the Axe mode. In Sword and Shield mode, you have more attack speed, more mobility, and the ability to guard. In Axe mode, your attacks do a lot more damage, and you can unleash the charges, the namesake of the Charge Blade. There are a lot of combos to use with the Charge Blade, but the 3-step process of wielding it is pretty easy once you understand what you're supposed to do. Here's what to do if you're a beginner and need a rundown on Charge Blade. You start in Sword and Shield mode, attack the monster until the file icons in the top left are all red. Then press the right trigger and B or R2 and circle together to load the charges. Then switch to Axe mode. You can switch to Axe mode just by pressing R2 or right trigger to do the transform / attack. Then basically just spam B or circle over and over and do that combo that unleashes the charges. And that's basically the basics. There is a lot more to this thing, but if you can pull off those 3 steps, you'll be fine. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the exploration. It is kind of sad that we have such a beautiful and interesting interconnected world in this game, and the Sacred can just auto-run wherever you need. Seriously, if you're mounted, you can just mark anything on your map, and your mount will get you there without any input from you at all. Of course, you can turn this off in the settings, but by default, you will never really have to explore anything on your own. Even the monsters automatically appear on your minimap at all times. There's no real tracking of monsters or even reasons to memorize their patterns or tendencies of where they go and when. If you like to play the game as efficiently as possible, I guess this is alright. It's honestly sometimes really nice that this game just gets you into fights so fast and has no frustration around knowing if you're in the right area or right level of the map. But if you crave and miss that immersion from like the second and third generations of Monster Hunter, I'd recommend turning off the Sacred Auto Run. It's too easy to use as a crutch. It's too helpful, and it trivializes the whole map. It's funny, I've been everywhere in every single locale of this game 100 times, but I've been so reliant on my mount to get me places that I couldn't tell you where anything is, and I probably couldn't even find my way back to a base camp from any random spot on any of the maps. If I had to summarize my overall feelings about the game, I would say that I really like it, love it even. It's a great entry into my favorite gaming franchise. It is not really as groundbreaking or mind-blowing as I thought it would be, but it is a great game that I've already put more than 70 hours into and don't really plan on stopping until Monster Hunter Wilds gets a sequel. What I really like is the art style, the design of the new monsters, the armor and weapons, and the additional and optional hunting perks like quest assistance, palico abilities, and mounted combat. What I don't like is that the exploration is not incentivized, even though it's a really beautiful world with awesome environments, and most of the characters are not really that memorable or impactful. The game also crashes a lot. When I was playing through the main storyline, I did not experience any crashes at all, but after I had rolled credits and had maybe around 30 hours of playtime, I started seeing 1 to 2 crashes a day until they patched, and until the title update, which also had a performance patch, I think. I still crash the game if I've had my PC on all day long before playing and don't reboot before launching the game. It's annoying, but certainly not a deal breaker. I definitely recommend Monster Hunter Wilds to newcomers to the series. I think it's the easiest that it's ever been to get into a Monster Hunter game, and if this one doesn't stick for you, probably none of them will. It's also a huge recommend to veteran players who like going solo through these games, as I was and have been able to do it all by myself so far, beating every piece of content the game currently has completely solo, including the Arch-Tempered Ray Dow. I am extremely excited for all the future title updates and inevitable DLC. I think adding the Lagiacrus will be awesome, and while I'm not hopeful for having underwater fights again, I can see them changing his moveset to be a little more challenging than the land Gaiacrus that we got post Monster Hunter 3.
I'm really happy that I got this game, and that's saying something because I'm the type of person that does not buy new games at release. But I love this series, and I was really hyped for a new entry, and the game has been a real blast so far. And it's still going. We constantly have new event quests popping up, and a new title update in June. So there's a lot to look forward to. So, like I said earlier, Monster Hunter Wilds really is just the next Monster Hunter game. But you know what? I'm okay with that. Actually, I'm more than okay with that because I love these games, and I will continue playing this series and this game in particular for the foreseeable future. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed my rambling and my very late review of Monster Hunter Wilds, and as always, until next time, thank you so much for watching.